Welcome to Three Questions with MotionPoint. I'm your host, Dominic Dithurbide, and today I have the absolute pleasure of being with Kevin O'Donnell, founder of Global 10X. Kevin, how are you doing today?
Doing great, Dominic. Really nice to chat with you today.
It's a pleasure to meet you for the first time here, and it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you very much. And I'm excited to start talking about this. By the way, listeners to this, definitely follow Kevin O'Donnell on LinkedIn. He's publishing some great stuff about the industry. And why don't we just dive in, Kevin?
Let's do it.
All right, well, question number one. How can localization teams quantify the impact of high quality translations on customer engagement or revenue growth?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's a deceptively simple question in a way. I would say for a localization team, always start with why are you localizing content in the first place? Actually, what job is it doing for your company? Are you trying to grow market share? Are you trying to improve your brand recognition? Are you trying to take some free customers and get them to pay? So figure out what is the most important for your localization to achieve. And one way you can answer that is to figure out, are you in marketing or product or sales or a different part of the company? And the goals of that department should really inform how you think about localization. So if you're in marketing, a lot of your goals are going to be around lead generation, conversion rates, brand recognition. And you can take that and apply that to your localization program and start figuring out what are the activities we're doing in localization that have the maximum impact on these marketing goals. And that might involve improving your ad copy in Google Ads to see how can we improve this so that our ad click-throughs are higher. It could be around the call to action buttons on your homepage on your website, and instead of just applying machine translation there, actually focus on crafting them or transcreating them to have a bigger impact. So by aligning the work you do in localization to the activities that matter most when you're part of the company, then you're linking the work you do to the metrics that matter for your company, and then that will have the bigger impact on your localization overall.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. What I'm hearing you say is understand the critical path to driving the objectives that you set out to hit, and prioritize high quality translations for those and iterate on those translations and test them, just as you would for, your flagship website in English, perhaps, right?
Completely. You'd never take a one-size-fits-all approach to any part of your company, any part of your business. And so for localization, instead of applying all content equally, and think about which is the most important content and what job is it doing for your business, and put more of your focus there, more of your effort there, understand it better, give it better context, spend more of your budget there, and then less of your budget and your time on parts of your localization content that has to be good, high quality, but is not as critical for your business.
Yeah, prioritize based on how sensitive a given asset is to translation quality, right?
Exactly.
To drive goals. Well, that's brilliant. We're totally aligned, and I think there's technologies out there, specifically around translation quality estimation, where you can go ahead and leverage machine translation, and then go forth with that, put it into a translation quality estimation tool, and that model will then tell you where you should maybe refine that machine translation, and that can help you also prioritize whether or not you want to do like that human in the loop extra investment at the end of it, right? And I think that's one of the interesting things that's happening in our industry is people, marketers in this example, people in product are able to now prioritize and better manage their budgets based on the sensitivity to translation quality of a given asset, as well as managing the costs of that by understanding whether or not you even need to invest further in the translation quality from machine translation, because as we all know, it's getting better and better.
It is. I think what's key to that is starting with the data and letting the data dictate how you spend your money and how you make decisions, rather than either guessing it or being so afraid of poor quality that you just apply maximum budget to everything. Let the data inform how you proceed there.
Absolutely. Well, let's move on to question number two. In your post, you've outlined several times, small bets that companies can take to ease into international expansion. What are some signs that maybe indicate that a company should transition from those small bets into a full-scale international investment?
Yeah, a small bet is something that a company will often embark on if they are not fully committed to expanding internationally, or they might have started with 2 or 3 languages, but they're trying to decide, should we localize into Italian? Should we localize into Greek? And they're not quite sure what difference it will make, and will there be sufficient ROI to justify it? So there's a lot of things that a company can do to test it out and to spend a small bit of money and low risk effort before embarking fully. So that might include running a marketing campaign in another language. So taking one of your classic marketing campaigns online that has worked well on Google, spend the money to do it right. Don't just run it through machine translation, and then determine what is the difference in ROI there. Are you getting more click-throughs? Are you getting better conversion rates for that particular localized marketing campaign in, let's say, Italian than you were in English? Is it driving more lead generation for you? That's one of the signals that you can then have to see, in this market for our product, there's a high degree of responsiveness when we localize here. You might find there's a market where English is very proficient, there's less need to localize, and there's maybe less of a difference there. But in certain markets, that will be almost essential. So that's one thing you can look at. Think about running a webinar. Think about local events that you can curate and put on at fairly low cost. And then figure out, what is the uptake we're getting from these? Are we seeing some greater engagement, greater interest? And does that show that we really need to invest more in this particular market or language? Another thing you can do, if you're a product-led growth company, is think about highlighting the pricing on your website in local currency. Local currency has a huge impact on conversion rates, and even if you can't fully support the processing of that local currency, simply displaying that currency in the local format will make a big difference to people signing up and clicking in and potentially converting. And that will give you another signal as to whether you need to invest fully in supporting all of the requirements of that market.
I really love what you're saying. Well, what I'm hearing here is you set a couple of, micro tests, like the currency was a great example, because even if you're not able to fulfill the transaction in that currency in the most fluid way, just by being able to gauge that people are changing the currency to another coin, right? Another currency. Well, that gives you a really interesting tell that people would prefer to see it and see how it translates into their currency of choice, or from where they're from. And I think that is a really good leading indicator. So uh, meditate on some leading indicators that you can set up to prove that the data is pointing at potential growth and success through engagement in those new markets, right? So that currency one is new to me. Makes a lot of sense. That's a great idea. I really like that.
Yeah, I've often worked with marketing departments that are trying to build a business case for greater investment into new markets, and they're not sure how to go about it, or they often will say, well, our competitors are here, we should spend money there. That's not really good enough for a lot of leaders. They want to see hard data if they're going to invest a lot of money into localizing and potentially new marketing campaigns in another market. So if you can actually go ahead and just run those experiments yourself, try out a couple of things, build the data, you're going to have a very compelling case when you then go to your senior leadership and say, we are now ready and we're very confident about the impact of expanding into these new markets, and we know there's a good ROI waiting for us here.
Yep. No, I hear you loud and clear. Absolutely. It makes sense. I mean, lead with the data, right? I feel like all of us, in any corporate environment today have to show that the proof is in the pudding. And even if you're an entrepreneur, you should be guided by that, right? And that's a great point. Well, let's double click on that. What happens when companies find that the data is suggesting that there is probably success in expansion, right? Many companies underestimate the challenges of truly adapting their go-to-market strategy for international audiences. Which of those, myths or pitfalls do you see companies struggle with the most when they're actually going through um, an change to their go-to-market strategy? What's a couple steps or first steps to overcoming stuff like that?
Yeah, I see this all the time, and a classic tell for me is where a company spends money to localize their website or localize their product, but they change absolutely nothing else about their go-to-market. So they're
Hmm.
still delivering and selling their product exactly as they did in, let's say, English US. And what
Yeah.
happens then is they get an amount of new customers using a different language, but they've far lower rates of paid conversion, far lower rates of engagement and usage, higher rates of churn. And then they wonder, why is this not working? We've localized, we've gone international, but it's not working for us. So a lot of the key problems here, I would start with monetization. So we are just talking about
Hmm.
currency, and that's one angle. But so if you support local currency, you can expect to see almost a 20% increase in your paid conversion. And it is a huge myth
Hmm.
that the world works on US dollar and the world understands that they can pay in credit card. Actually, a lot of the
Yeah.
world don't use credit cards every day. US dollar, if you're not used to using it, you don't know what that means in your own currency. There's this
Right.
cognitive load you're giving your international users. So by simply supporting their currency, having multiple payment methods, ideally having localized pricing, you're removing all that friction, and then you're giving
Hmm.
people the mechanism that they can pay for the product that they want. Um, Second one I think about would be around machine translation or AI translation. And it's got to the stage where it is good enough for a lot of use cases, but a lot of people will see that good enough and apply it to everything. And
Hmm.
the way I think about it is, would you ask ChatGPT to write the entire copy for your English website? You probably wouldn't. You would probably want to maybe use it for curating and spell checking yours, but you would lose all the creativity and the originality.
Hmm.
And that's what happens if you use that for all of your translation. It might be readable, it might be reasonable quality, but it's not going to engage, it's not going to feel like this is a high quality localization. So instead of using machine or AI translation for everything, think about the job that the content needs to do for you, and then apply higher quality to that and spend a bit more money on that. It will make an enormous difference. The third
Yeah.
myth I might point out would be around don't default to Google search everywhere. The world
Hmm.
doesn't use Google, actually. There are
That's a
many
good point.
markets where Google is not the first and most popular search engine. And what comes to mind for me is in Japan, Yahoo is the number one search engine. In South Korea, Naver is the dominant search engine there. And I've worked with companies before that have been pouring money into Google in these markets, and they're not seeing the return, and they're wondering why are we not breaking through. It's simply because the audience wasn't there. They were missing the mark on where to focus their effort. And the related point is a lot of companies will assume, well, Google search ads worked for us in the US. We will copy and paste that internationally. And in
Hmm.
some markets, that's not the right approach. You need to go through socials. You need to go through alternative methods for acquiring your customers and getting your brand recognition. And if you stick with that one playbook and don't adapt it, you're going to see much lower rates of success. So, not adapting your playbook, not thinking about changing it for the market you're searching for, is such a key gap.
Yep, I absolutely agree on everything really. And starting off with the example that you put for currency, you know, it's always about reducing friction. I'm a marketer, and sometimes I look at some of our forms on our website, and I think, well, I know more fields will maybe give me a higher quality lead, but sometimes I just want a little bit more leads in general. So I'll reduce the friction. I'll remove a field. But I think there's also innate sense of familiarity that one is looking for, especially if they're going to make a transaction online, where you want to feel like this was built for you.
Hmm.
And if you just default to, what you just said, which is, well, people, understand the dollar, trust the dollar, I'll just transact in the dollar, even though I'm translating into another language that uses another currency. Well, there's a lot of friction there that you've just introduced that isn't even rendering on the screen, but it's happening in the mind. And what it is, well, for example, how is that going to exchange into my currency, right? Is this going to be much more? And who's doing it? And well, this is clearly not made for me. Let me go to a competitor that is offering the same thing that makes me feel that, at least if anything happens, I can get in contact with them, for example, right? And I think that's a really good example. And then the other one is, yeah, just because a platform like Google, for example, which you bring up a great point. I heard or read just a week ago, I think, that for the first time ever, Google's, of all the searches in the world, Google dropped from the 90 percentile. They now are the owner of 89% of all searches. Platforms like TikTok, X, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and Yandex, right? Like a bunch of others,
Hmm.
like are still growing. They still exist, and people online are still searching in different places. So you got to make sure that you do your research right and figure out, well, is the market that I'm trying to serve, is their consumer behavior rooted in, for example, Google or somewhere else, right? And optimize for that. I think that's also brilliant. I'll give you one example that happened to MotionPoint, and this is very ironic. I think what happened to us was we expanded into Europe, and we did really good with um, companies and organizations in Germany, in Finland and Estonia, in the UK. But guess what? When we wanted to sell into big companies, successful companies that had a lot of talented people, for example, in France or Italy, even though they knew English, and MotionPoint offers services and technology. So it's not really a do-it-yourself transaction or
Sure.
product that you get in. It's something that you have to be talking with people, right? Well, the irony was, yeah, well, they came to our website that's translated and localized, opted in with a nice message in Italian. I want to translate my website, but guess what? The people that were serving them, were, and the sales enablement that we had was in English, and it was like, even though they understood English, they had that like unfamiliar, this isn't made for me feeling, where I rather, even though we're talking about English to Italian or English to French translation, I'd rather talk to my point of contact in French or in Italian. And that's a big paradigm shift. And I thought that was very ironic. So we were successful, but I think we were more successful when we started hiring people that spoke those languages to both serve and sell, our offerings. And that was a big, it was laughable, but I like telling that story because it's a good example of that, right? There's
Oh,
more than just
completely.
translation. It's more than just
Yeah,
translation.
completely. I've often run a workshop where it's a customer journey workshop, and I work with a team. I would say, put yourself in the shoes of the customer and go through every single step of their journey as they go to discover your product, they evaluate it, they maybe talk to somebody, they buy it, they go through support, they go through retention. Through each one of these steps, what is their experience? How high
Hmm.
quality is it? Are there any gaps?
Hmm.
Is it fully localized? Does it work? And there's usually something that fails. There's usually some gap because it is not thought about in a holistic way. But you're so
Hmm.
right that those details matter. That
Yeah.
idea of feeling like it's being created for that local audience makes a very big difference.
Yeah, which goes to your point about using AI for everything, right? Like, you kind of reminded me of the term, the uncanny valley hypothesis. Have you ever heard of that?
Oh, sure,
Right?
sure.
Yeah. I feel like that's just a topic that's very important these days with AI, because I think the uncanny valley predicts that something that looks almost human will give you like a very eerie feeling, and human beings will be very like, that's very suspicious and kind of freak us out. I think that that's a sense that also happens through AI copywriting. That's that, you know, when you just use that, there's like this, there's just this uncanny valley there, right? Like you kind of feel you're a little stitious, not superstitious, but a little stitious, you know what I mean, about the
Yes.
whole thing. So so that's a great point as well. You know, you got to be intentional of serving a new market as you would your flagship market, and that shows and it transmits itself whether or not you know the language or not, or whether or not you translate it, right? Like translation is not enough. It's driving the value and the trustworthiness that is backing up what you're saying, right? It's more than that.
Yeah, there's no magic switch when it comes to international growth. So usually it takes a company multiple years to get true product market fit in their domestic market, and they have to change a
Yep.
lot of things, pivot, try out different mechanisms. So to go international, you shouldn't expect it's going to work immediately. You need to do the same thing. You need to figure out what are the dynamics that are different. What mechanisms do we need to change in order to be successful? And that's often the blind spot that a lot of companies have. They think, well, we will just localize and then we will arrive. We will see the money roll in.
Yep. Well, I'm right there with you, Kevin. This was a great conversation. Thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure. Thanks, Dominic.
Absolutely. That does it for three questions with Motion Point. Until next time, thank you, everybody.